And welcome to Law&Crime, everybody. I'm Jesse Weber, and thanks for joining us. Today, we plan to be live in day 3 of the sentencing hearing for the Golden State Killer, the East Area Rapist, the Visalia Ransacker, the original Night Stalker, whatever you want to call him. I'm talking about 74-year-old Joseph James DeAngelo Jr., the man who terrorized California in the 1970s and 80s. Now, as part of his plea deal, which was seeing him plead guilty to 13 murders, 13 kidnapping counts, as well as admitting to 150 uncharged crimes, including multiple rapes and burglaries, he has to sit there and listen to each and every one of those victim impact statements. Now, yesterday, and for the past several days, we have heard from the victims and the family members of the victims who were sexually assaulted, beat up, and burglarized by this man. These statements have been incredibly moving and powerful. And now the question is, how could it really get any worse? Well, today is going to be about the murders. So it's all about the people that DeAngelo killed. You're going to hear from those family members, and it should be absolutely something incredible to listen to. Now, before we even get into that, and before we go live, and we're keeping a careful eye on the courtroom feed out of California, I want to recap what happened yesterday. Let's start with one of the survivors, Jane Carson Sander. Take a look.
Well, you know, quarter of me, being a Christian, I want to say to you, may God have mercy on your soul. But then there's another 3/4 of me that just want to tell you, buddy, to rot in hell. Well, I want to thank all of my supporters that are here today. I want to thank everyone that's worked so hard on getting us all here. And I'm just blessed to have supporters at home, supporters here. And I also want to especially thank a friend that's accompanying me today. And that friend is Bonnie. Take your mask off. If Bonnie were able to speak, Joe, she would want you to know that as just a teenager 50 years ago, she broke her engagement to you when she realized that you had become manipulative and abusive. When you thought you could kidnap her and force her to marry you, even a gun pointed at her face could not make her choose you. When she saw who you really were, she was done with you. I can see that I Hate You, Bonnie was a result of your frustration because you lost control over her, but she bears none of that responsibility for your violent choices. And we consider her one of us, the sister survivors of your malicious attacks. When you are wheeled away to begin your sentence, you'll return in Bonnie's life to that forgotten and insignificant place, gone from her life forever. Amen.
Yeah, what a dramatic moment that was. His former fiancée appearing in court, absolutely incredible. And also the idea that during many of these attacks, he repeated her name, Bonnie, Bonnie. So it gives you kind of an insight into what was going on into DeAngelo's mind. Okay, I just got word we can go live right now. The sentencing hearing has continued.
And through the gate that separated our backyard from the carport and driveway, all the while having a gun pointed at my head. When we were under the carport, I heard my dad yell something and saw him pause in the kitchen just for a moment before he charged out of the house through the back door near us. DeAngelo fired 2 shots, hitting my dad. He then turned the gun on me as I was down on the ground. My only thought was, this is it. And put my head down, expecting him to kill me. Instead, he started kicking me in the head and face, then ran off down the driveway. I ran back into the house to find my dad had collapsed at the front door and my mom hovering over him. I knew in my heart that he was still trying to save me by going through the front door and cutting him off in the front yard, but he never got that far. My dad lay at the front door, bleeding to death. and ended up dying on the way to the hospital. I truly believe that if anything had happened to me that night and he couldn't save me, that would have killed him. For many years, I felt guilt for what happened that night. I felt that maybe there was something I could have done or said to warn my dad to stay there and never come out. It wasn't until I became a parent myself that I realized there was nothing I could have said that would have kept my dad from trying to save me. My mom always said that it wouldn't have mattered if there were 20 men out there with guns. That wouldn't have stopped them. My dad was such a gentle soul and loving, kind-hearted man who loved his family more than anything. My dad died saving my life that night, and he is my hero. My dad and I were always very close, and I loved him so much. We loved to go hiking in the mountains together, and we had some great talks. He was such a wonderful dad, was never judgmental and wouldn't preach to me. Instead, through talking about a situation I was dealing with, whether it was school, friends, or boys, he would help me figure things out on my own. My mom and dad both had a very strong faith in God, and we were always very active in the church. My dad taught Sunday school and Bible studies, and he was an usher and a deacon. However, his faith and goodness did not end at the church doors. It filled every part of his personal life with his family and friends, and his professional life as a journalism professor at College of the Sequoias with his colleagues and students. I believe he absolutely loved every aspect of his life. Our strong faith in God is what helped my mom and me and my two brothers, who were just 14 and 7 at the time, get through the tough years following my dad's death. We somehow managed to stay in the same house, but with added security. I slept in my mom's room for the next year because I was too afraid to sleep in my bedroom and be by myself. Knowing that my dad's murderer was never caught and was still out there somewhere left us all feeling very vulnerable. I was told by the detectives that since I was the only living witness to my dad's murder, there was a chance he could come after me. The police gave us extra security and patrolled our neighborhood every night to keep watch on our home, but I still lived in fear. Eventually, with God's help and the love and support of our family, friends, and our church family, our fear and grief lessened with time, and we started getting on with our lives. My mom never worried that the murderer was not caught. She always said he would face judgment from God eventually and turned it over to him. I started to believe that myself as well, and I didn't want to waste my life worrying that he was out there and could come back. On April 24th, 2018, I was shocked when I was informed that Joseph D'Angelo was arrested in Sacramento and would be facing 13 murder charges, including my dad's. I truly never thought I would live to see that day, but unfortunately, my mom did not. We are also relieved and thankful for the perseverance of so many people who did not give up trying to solve this case. I would personally like to thank the Tulare County District Attorneys, Tim Ward and David Alavesos, and Renee Newman, the Tulare County Victims Advocate, as well as Detective James Cummings of the Visalia Police Department for keeping me informed and guiding me through these past 2 years. You have helped me deal with all of this more than you know. Next month, on September 11th, it will be 45 years since my dad was taken from us. He was only 45 years old at the time, in the prime of his life. Not having him here as part of my life left a huge hole in my heart. My dad was not around to walk me down the aisle when I got married, and our children were never able to know him. He would have been a wonderful grandpa. What sickens and angers me the most is that D'Angelo was able to live a normal life with his family for all those years, while my family and I could not be with my dad. I am so thankful that he will at least spend the rest of his miserable life in prison. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there anybody else that wishes to be heard as to count one? All right, thank you. Furthermore, defendant admitted to the uncharged act of attempted murder of Officer Bill McGowan, having occurred on December 10th, 1975 in the county of Tulare in violation of Penal Code Section 664/187. Is there any victim or victim's family member that wish to be heard as to that uncharged act?
Wow. You just heard from the daughter of Claude Snelling, Professor Claude Snelling, who was taken in 1975, shot dead right in front of his daughter. As I said, this was expected to be absolutely heartbreaking, and this is just the tip of the iceberg from what we're going to be hearing today. I want to bring on my guest, Law&Crime's Cheri Austin, as well as former Philly prosecutor Bernardo Villalona. Great to have you both here. Bernardo, I'll start with you. What did you make of the first impact statement of the day?
It's so sad, Jesse. I mean, it gives you chills thinking of that this young lady experienced her father being killed right before her eyes. Not only did she have to deal that her father was killed, but she also witnessed it, which makes it even more egregious, the crime that this murderer, this heartless murderer, this emotionless murder, this sadistic murder committed against her father and so many others. And at least this young lady now had her opportunity after so many years, 45 years, to speak and tell her truth in a courtroom.
And she didn't even think that this day would ever come. That's that sense of closure that we keep talking about. Cheri, let me turn it over to you. I didn't get a chance to mention this before, but when we started our program and we showed the clip of, his former fiance in the courtroom, people have wondered whether or not she was the cause for his crime spree. Because a lot of the times when he'd be committing these attacks, he would say her name as almost blaming her for what happened, as we try to make sense for why this man committed this evil upon the world. What do you think about that, Cheri?
Well, I think it's very interesting that when we heard Jane Carson Sandler talk about Bonnie, her friend, that she is a sister survivor, it was very important to point out it is not Bonnie's fault. Bonnie got away from this individual and she spared, having to go through all of that, but it's not her fault. And she's been victimized in so many ways, just like the other survivors. So I thought it was wonderful that Jane Sandler talked about that so that Bonnie herself doesn't feel as though she should carry any of the weight of the vicious crimes that D'Angelo committed against her and everyone else that he victimized.
Yeah, he's the only one to blame, and we're seeing a different flavor of these victim impact statements. Each day has been incredibly hard to listen to, but this is just a totally different level where he took loved ones away from their families and friends. Just absolutely horrible. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to jump live. Stay tuned. The sentencing hearing continues for the Golden State Killer, Joseph James D'Angelo Jr., and today it is about the murder victims. And I shouldn't just say the murder victims, because who we just heard from during the commercial break was the daughter of Detective Bill McGowan, who was actually shot at by the D'Angelo. He survived. The actual bullet hit a flashlight that he had in his hand. And it was such a powerful statement where she said, this man D'Angelo was able to live a full life while his victims were not able to. That seems to be a recurring theme. And today, the statements that we're hearing, it's just so true. We're going to jump back live and hear from the next victim in this case. All right, while they set up, Bernardo, let me turn to you. You know, this is a bit of a formality that we have here, right? And we all know that D'Angelo is going to be sentenced to 11 consecutive life terms. We all know where this is going. Yet the judge, in a very similar manner to the Larry Nassar case, is allowing as many victims and their family members to come forward with statements, and they can take as much time as they want to say what they want to say. But does this affect what the judge is ultimately going to do? Because my understanding is he's reserved, I think, about 2 hours to deliver his sentence. And I just imagine that he has a monologue, a speech that he's going to deliver, and he is just adding in what he's hearing from all these statements.
So, Jesse, what the victims say are not going to affect the sentence, because this was already a negotiated plea deal where there has been a negotiated plea between both the prosecution and the defense that the sentence is going to be 11 life term sentences without the possibility of parole. So what we're doing now is that the victims obviously have their victims' right. They have the right to speak at the time of sentencing, so they're exercising that right. This is their time to speak after so many years that have gone by. But what will happen is that the judge is going to get his opportunity to speak when he renders the sentence that has been negotiated. He will be making a lengthy statement because this is something that took place over so many years. You got to think that this man was the most sadistic and elusive criminal, murderer, rapist in U.S. history. What the judge, normally you can think that if a judge is not willing to accept the sentence and instead impose a different sentence, the most he could have got here is the death penalty. But then again, the prosecutors negotiated with the death penalty is off the table. And regardless, with the death penalty, there's a moratorium in California. The death penalty hasn't taken place. Someone has not been killed since, I believe, 2006 in California.
You know, he's the stuff of nightmares. That's really the best way to explain it. When you think about the person creeping in the dark, that's who this is. And so it's absolutely heartbreaking, but also shocking to hear these details. Let's go back live into court with the next statement.
My wife, she's been married to me for 39 years of this 42-year ordeal and always gives me strength. And if she can't find the right words, she always knows when to tell me. Call your grandbabies and find your smile. Your Honor, my family and I and many other families are all here to see the terror and evil that Mr. D'Angelo brought to so many finally come to an end. We can all start to put this horrible ordeal into its final stage of healing. He robbed my sister Katie and brother-in-law Brian of their young lives. He took away their chance to have a family of their own. He took away my brother Keith's family's chance to get to know and love their aunt and uncle. He took away my wife and children and grandchildren's chance to know and love them. His mistake was he had no idea how much Katie and Brian were loved. They have remained alive in all our hearts. I recently learned something else. My sister Katie, who just turned 20, 4 days before D'Angelo chased her down and shot and killed her in cold blood, she touched so many others in just her 20 short years, not just our family with love and kindness, but so many friends also. I have found out that so many others have kept her in their hearts the whole 42 years since he took her life. So you see, Katie and Brian were special, and we all loved them so much. D'Angelo, you hurt our family and so many other families so much, but now that part's over. You no longer live in the shadows. We all know who you are. You lurked in the dark so you could prey on innocent victims. Well, now you are the prey, D'Angelo, and you can look over your shoulder the rest of your life. You can stop your silly little act of being weak and feeble and pay for what you did. You're not important. We will remember Katie and Brian for the rest of our lives, but after you're sentenced, you will be a nobody. You are not worth any more of my family's time. People like to say that now we can have closure. To me, closure means there's an end. There is no closure for us because nothing changes. It doesn't bring Katie or Brian back. I guess it does bring closure for D'Angelo, as this is the end for him. You can't hurt anyone ever again. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. Is there anybody else that wishes to be heard as it counts 2 or 3?
Yes, Your Honor. That was Ken Smith, who was Katie Smith's brother, Katie Maggiore. This is Karen Smith, her aunt.
Very good. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning, ma'am.
I'm here on behalf of Katie and Brian. They are my niece and nephew. They had everything going for them. Brian was just going to be shipped to Germany with the Air Force, and they were all excited because Katie got to go too. They loved life and everybody loved them in the 18 months that they were married. I was actually pregnant with my son when Katie got married. So on January 29th, 1978, Katie calls and says, "Aunt Karen, you got to come over. It's my birthday," which I did. I said, "Well, Tommy's down for his nap. Well, wake him up. Come on over." So we did. So we sat there and we had birthday cake. Katie put Tommy in front of the cake because he was very special to Katie, and his fingers got right in there. She stands there and licks his fingers and said, "Now this is a birthday." So sure enough, I already said that. It got later in the evening, so Katie and Brian had to leave and come home to Sacramento. Who knew that that would be the last time we see him? But on February 2nd, 1978, it was a parent's worst nightmare. The Air Force came to our shop and told the father, Katie's father, and someone had told my sister, Darlene. So what my husband calls, because we were in business, "Get over there. Something's happened." I had no idea that it was Katie and Brian had just been killed. So naturally, we all went. Kenny, my nephew, he was a junior in high school, ready to play baseball from McLean High School. Keith was only 10. Keith and Kenny no longer had a sister or brother-in-law to share the many years of happiness. They never got to have any more birthdays, no more holidays. Their grandkids never got to see him. Their kids never got to see him. But believe me, we all know who Katie and Brian are. It seems like yesterday it still seems like yesterday when this all happened. We will miss them to the end of time. The only thing I'm happy for is I got to live long enough to see this happen. I had met Mr. Maggiore at the cancer center a week before he passed. And his last words to me was, "I just wanted to live long enough to see this." Well, Mr. Maggiore, I did. And I'm here to thank him and his family, our family, the Clumps, the Smith, the Maggiores, for everything and all the support we've always had. And especially to all the people that have worked on this case. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Your Honor, we do have one final message from Loretta Maggiore. She is Brian Maggiore's elderly mother. She could not be here today.
All right, and that's focused on the Maggiore murders. Just absolutely heartbreaking when you're listening to this and even saying it's not a sense of closure, but it could be for the man that we see right there, D'Angelo. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll be live. All right, we're about to jump live once again into the Joseph James D'Angelo sentencing hearing. Right now, they're focusing on the murders out of Santa Barbara, that of Debra Manning and Robert Offerman. Before we do that, Terry, let me go to you. We had just heard about the murders of the Maggiores, and that was really heartbreaking hearing from the family members, particularly when you think about that this couple was shot dead while walking their dog, and Katie Maggiore was almost able to escape, but yet she was shot by this man. The couples, the fact that, Terry, that he eventually would target couples, that seemed to go to his MO. What do you make of that?
You know, I think it gave him power over not just a female individual, but also her boyfriend or spouse. And it made him feel as though he could control everything. I think he slowly escalated into killing people just for the sake of killing them. And you listen to these statements, and it's just horrible, taking the life of someone who is so kind, a couple who has so much to live for. And you heard that in the statements of the brother and the aunt, especially, and Jesse, this stuck with me. She let, on her own birthday, her nephew, you know, sit in front of the cake. That just says what kind of woman she was. It's horrible that he killed these people.
Yeah, the world is a sadder place without these people. I want to go now live. Again, this is about Alexandra Manning and Robert Offerman.
Perhaps she'd be married with children and grandchildren and have an accomplished professional record with published journal articles and books. Instead, her vibrant life lay wasted by the obsessive madness of Joseph James D'Angelo, a man we find hard to forgive. Allie's not here to speak, but we, Roseanne Howard and Natasha Holliday, are here to provide a statement on her behalf. Almost 41 years later, the sordid, tortured, and violent circumstances under which our dear friend died continues to haunt us. We miss Allie. While we have grown our own families and had our own professional accomplishments, Allie was denied those opportunities. Her future was stolen. We regularly miss her friendship in our lives and her presence around our children and grandchildren. Allie's death not only reached deep into our lives, but cut across the Santa Maria community of her patients, friends, and mother, causing her mental and physical demise. When going through her family therapy office after her murder, we found her patients' heartfelt letters and drawings as a testament to how her patients valued her. Her vulnerable patients, some whom were children, were left to cope with Allie's horrific rape and murder. Their doctor of light and hope, and our best and loving friend, was gone forever. In closing, thank you to those who never gave up on their pursuit of justice, the Northern and Southern California police, the journalists and the bloggers who kept the public eye focused on the case, and the prosecutors in the Northern and Southern District Attorney's Office of California and their staff. Finally, we would like to acknowledge the strength and courage of all the survivors and their families and partners who came forward with their testimony. You are all real heroes. Thank you, Roseanne Howard and Natasha Holliday.
Thank you, counsel. Is there any other victim impacts on counts 4 and 5?
There is not.
Count 6, Mr. D'Angelo entered a guilty plea to the charge of murder in the first degree of Cheri Domingo, which occurred July 27, 1981 in the county of Santa Barbara. Count 7, the charge of murder in the first degree of Greg Sanchez, which also occurred on July 27, 1981 in the county of Santa Barbara. Is there any member of the family that wished to be heard as to counts 6 and 7, the murders of Cheri Domingo or Greg Sanchez?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead, sir.
the pain for our family goes well beyond the words I'm able to share with you. I'm not going to attempt to convey the level of hurt for our Greg Sanchez. It's been a crippling process for many years. The trial will hopefully be the beginning of the end for our ordeal. Listening to the victim impact statements this week has been a challenge for all of us. Increasingly frustrating to hear the victims' families who follow the previous victim on this timeline of horror over the years from the same perpetrator. Long before COVID-19, the D'Angelo virus infected our families and our communities. My youngest son, who's here today, asked me, how could this happen? How could this go for so long and not be solved? It's convenient and perhaps easy for me to tell him that the times were different, that technology today and social media would have not allowed this to have happened. That being said, there were 2 double homicides in the same neighborhood, with the same motive. And this followed an attempted double homicide in the same neighborhood. Let's all be clear. Cooperation between communities would have undoubtedly stopped D'Angelo virus from spreading. Technology and social media would have forced the hand, I think, of a lot of the communities. I've heard a lot of discussion this week about how adaptive, how smart, how potentially cunning this virus was. He was an officer. He knew the likelihood that jurisdictions each wanted to solve their own case, and that drive created an environment for lack of sharing and communication. Greg and Cheri didn't deserve any of this. It's been 14,269 sunrises that Greg and Cheri have not had. You took beautiful lives in horrific ways. It's by the grace of God that Cheri's daughter, Debbie, was not home at the time. All of our lives were forever changed. You've tortured the parents, the families for 39 years. My grandmother, Palmita, later in her life, could not remember Greg had passed. She would ask where Gregory was, and we couldn't answer that question. Each day, the same question, the same blank stare. And all we could say is that he's resting in heaven. Our memories of Greg will not be tarnished by the acts of the virus sitting in court today, but by the love we have for him in our hearts.
Bernardo, I want to turn to you as we're listening to this victim impact statement regarding Greg Sanchez and Cheri Domingo. There seems to be blame here in the sense that authorities could have done more to locate, apprehend D'Angelo earlier and didn't have to take all the way to 2018. What do you make of that?
So, Jesse, this is something that actually is common when you're dealing with victims of crimes and their families. They feel like the people can do more, that law enforcement can do more, that the prosecutor's office can do more. But it's something that I don't know. Given the times, we were talking about the 1970s, 1980s, they didn't have the technology that we had now. And actually, this man just also mentioned that if there was social media, if there was more news coverage, that maybe there would have been more pressure. But aside, social media and more coverage probably could have given them more clues as to who this man was that was responsible for these crimes. For example, if he had a cell phone, they could have been tracking the cell phone, using cell phone data.
Yeah.
But of course, back in the 70s and the 80s, that did not exist.
It's an interesting point to make, but having said that, I think we can all agree, or we all hope, that that reign of terror that D'Angelo inflicted, that wouldn't happen today. There's just too many resources, too many tools, and I hope I'm right. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll be live. All right, welcome back, everybody. Who you're about to hear from is the daughter of Cheri Domingo. Cheri Domingo, back in 1981, was raped and savagely beaten to death by Joseph James D'Angelo. Let's go live.
Mom was only 35 when she died, but she was energetic and stylish, and strangers often took us for sisters. Greg was even younger, just 27. With a quick wit, stunning good looks, and a charming smile. He was always busy doing something productive and fun, fixing up his old 57 Chevy, playing softball with his brothers, mixing recordings of our favorite popular dance music. These two people created the easy listening soundtrack that still plays in my head and my heart. I cherish the reflections of a time when there was always sunshine and music, even when things weren't perfect. Mom and Greg were two remarkable, young, vibrant people who were denied the opportunity to even be breathing today. When I sat down to write this statement, my first instinct was to document the ups and downs my life has taken in the nearly 40 years since the homicides. It seemed a daunting task. Only now am I realizing the magnitude of the impact that losing my mother and her sweet boyfriend in such a violent way had on my young life and on my view of the world. When I took my first steps toward the yellow crime scene tape around our house in 1981, I knew my life was changing. You can't be stopped by police and yellow tape and not be stunned. It was surreal, almost like slow motion, but over in a flash. Life would never be the same, but I was only 15 years old and unable to truly grasp that concept. My mom and my beloved Greg were dead. The house looked picture perfect from the outside, but I was told that on the inside, the scene was grisly. I was not permitted back into the house, ever. Not to look for my cat, not to pack my bedroom, not to verify for myself that what the police said had happened was even true. I didn't realize it then, but I had watched my mom and Greg dance carefree across our living room for the last time. The next few hours and days were bizarre. I called my dad, who lived several hours away. I called my maternal grandmother out of state. And I talked to the police. I was a fragile teenager whose world had just been turned upside down, but I had to answer questions from a stranger in a polygraph examination. Do you know who killed your mother? No. Did you kill your mother? Oh God, are they really asking me this? No. I helped the police sort out which items from the home stayed in the house and which I would take to my new home at Dad's. I attended a memorial service for my mom at our church. I'm sure there must have been a service for Greg too, but I don't remember having the chance to really say a good goodbye to his parents or his brothers. There has always been an emptiness in my heart from that lingering loss, not just of Greg, but of his beautiful family. Within just a few days, I said goodbye to my friends and left for Southern California, where we had Mom's funeral and interment. I have the guest books from both of her services, but no clear memories of those or of her burial. Oddly, I do remember helping my grandfather pick out her casket and helping my grandmother design and order her headstone. I remember how devastated they both were, having to bury their own child. I turned 16 a few days after Mom was buried. There was a small impromptu party at a pizza place, I think, but I don't really remember that either. In the mix of it all, I remember feeling lost, but I also recall being so thankful that I had a safe place to land.
Wow. I mean, it doesn't get any more heart-wrenching than that. Not only recalling the moment that you lost a loved one, but being questioned by the police as if you did it. So Bernarda, I want to turn to you. I want to give you some of the final words here because I know we have to sign you off. As incredibly tough and just impossible it is for them to go up there, speak in open court about the pain and have to confront the Golden State Killer, this would have been a lot worse for them if this went to trial, right? And they would have had to be witnesses and had to be cross-examined. Bernarda, walk us through what we should be thinking here.
So, Jesse, for the last 10 years, I've only been prosecuting homicide cases, murder cases. It's coming to an end. But I can tell you that the most emotional part has always been the victim impact statement. For those that are given statements of family members that they lost, and if they were not a witness to, that wouldn't be testifying at trial, this is their only time to speak. This is their only time to tell us, tell the judge who these loved ones were, how they were, who they left behind, their personality, and also how it affected them. Because if there were a trial, even if they were called to the witness stand, this information wouldn't be coming out. The information wouldn't be coming out of the birthday parties and the graduations that were missed and the good deeds that were done by the lost one. So technically, this is the time the victim statement. I tell you from prosecuting homicides is that from the very beginning, witnesses and the victims, they want to speak. I want to tell the judge who this person was. Let me give you pictures of my loved one. I want you to think about them. Because for all that time doing a prosecution, you don't see that person that has been killed. You don't hear about them. You don't know who they were. You don't know their day in and day out.
But this gives us a sense, and you feel that pain. You feel like you know these people, and you feel the pain that this family and these loved ones have gone through for so many years. And there's only one person to blame, D'Angelo. Bernarda, that was a great point. I'm sorry we have to sign you off. Definitely come back next time. We have so much to talk about with this case. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be live.